as you have delved into, or maybe not have yet even opened up the file, like, you will see that the self-studies follow a very common table of contents. This is how they're structured. That's how they are built. And notice that sections 4 and 5 are areas where the program has identified within its own self what we call potential initiatives, meaning things they might do to improve their processes. And then importantly, number 5, the matrix of improvement initiatives. These are the 3 or 4 or 5 things that they are committing to doing. So it's not just to say that we would like to get better, we think this might help us. They've actually, as a program, come to terms with saying, these are things we will do. All right? So those are very important ones to look at in terms of commendations and affirmations and recommendations. So one of their improvement initiatives might just be stellar, and you're like, please, this is excellent that you're going to do it. Commonly, the improvement initiatives are good fodder for affirmations. You've reviewed them, you think they're good, you affirm them. You say, keep forward in advancing those initiatives. And sometimes they'll have an improvement initiative that you feel, well, there's some good in this, right? But I have a little bit of a recommendation to maybe help improve what you're doing or augment what you're doing. So those improvement initiatives are really important. Section 6 will not apply to all of the programs, but the academic audit's been around now for about 13, 14 years. So many of the programs that you are reviewing and visiting have done an academic audit before, typically somewhere around 4 to 6 years ago. So if that's the case, then 4 to 6 years ago, they made a commitment to a matrix of improvement initiatives. So this section, the follow-up report, is where they are to, in very concise format, tell you what they did with the things they said they were going to do 5 years ago. So this is really the accountability part of it, and hopefully what we're seeing here is kind of a continuous improvement, that they have actually taken to heart those things that have been committed to in the past. They can also, in this report, reflect on auditor team recommendations. They are not required to act on your recommendations, but they may have. So the previous auditor team may have recommended that they improve their presentation of materials for public review and public display. And then if you're seeing that there are a lot of gaps in this report too, then you could reflect in your report on maybe what they need to do to improve that even more. But that's what we mean by that follow-up report. And then the programs are all eligible to provide you with various appendices. We used to, back in the day before Al Gore invented the internet, limit that to 10 written pages of appendices. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, one of the programs just had 1 page of appendices, but every line of that page was a web link. That took you to 2 or 10, or in some cases, the CV of all the faculty of the program, hundreds of pages. And then clearly the cow was out of the barn. So at this point in time, the appendices, and in fact, the entire self-study report may be populated with web links. And you are invited to access those links, and they should provide additional information about the program and enrichment for you about the program. The extent to which you, for example, read every CV of every faculty member is just I guess, whether or not you got a good novel to read or not that night. But you're welcome to do so. What we try to emphasize to the programs is if there are particular documents that you use in your program or examples for example, of an assessment. One program, for example, that I remember that I audited did a mid-course correction process where somewhere around the 5th or 6th week of the semester, they just did a survey of their students and then got the feedback from the students. It was like through SurveyMonkey. It was all anonymous on several questions, not too many, that were, how are we doing? How are you learning? What could we be doing better? And so that was the kind of thing that was really, to me, very special to be able to just click on a link and go there and go through it and be able to reflect on it and comment on it. So that's the kind of thing that might be out there. Fine arts programs, sometimes you'll get links to the programs for a recital or for a performance or that kind of thing. Just ways of giving you, very often you'll get a link to the website. There are some forms of review that say, no, the only thing you can look at is a self-study. That's not the case with the academic audit. So you're not limited to what they give. If you want to go to the website of the program and look at it, even if you're not referred to it, or the absence thereof, because that might lead you to think, maybe this program should have visibility on its institution's website. That might be a way of improving. So that's a little bit about appendices. Questions about any of this, about the self-study report? What I always recommend is the first time you read it with your hands tied behind your back. When I was teaching English and reading Composition 1 essays, I promised my students that I would read their papers from beginning to end without marking them in any way, shape, or form. So on Sunday afternoons, my wife would tie my hands to the chair in the living room, and I would turn the pages with my nose, or touch the screen. Next page, next page. But there's such a tendency to, like, as soon as you see something, to kind of jump on it. And again, these are not extraordinarily long documents. Kind of read through the whole thing, get a feeling for the whole picture of the program, and then go back and start making your marks. One technique that I use is, and this comes from having worked for many years with the Tennessee Center for Performance Excellence, that follows the Baldrige criteria, which is a national and now international form of quality improvement. They talk about a program's strengths and this is where it comes from, their opportunities for improvement. They use that so much as they just call them OFIs. And when I go through a self-study report, I have a tendency to just put S's and O's. And if I see something that's particularly strong and outstanding and that might constitute a commendation, for example, I'll put an S. If there's something that I feel is missing or weak or under, or leads me with additional questions that are not being answered, I put an O. And then when I go back a third time, 3's a charm, then I look at the O's in particular and try to delve into them and see if they provide an opportunity for me to form a question or a prompt for the site visit. All right. This is a little bit about the follow-up section that we talked about on the report. Notice just number 2 here, that if if your program is for quality assurance funding, and this is the second time that a program has gone through the academic audit process, that there is a section in both the graduate and undergraduate rubrics. All but one of you will be doing undergraduate programs. We are doing the master's level program in English for APSU this year, but everyone else will be doing the undergraduate rubric, Section 7. And there's an evaluative section there for quality assurance funding. And then the site visit arrangements. So let me just take you through the pragmatic part of this. First of all, if you are close by to the site, you know, you teach at Nashville State and you live in Belmead and the program is TSU, you're probably just going to go home that night, right? I mean, you're probably not going to stay in a motel or a hotel close to TSU. But if you are traveling any distance at all, and people have said, well, I live in Murfreesboro and I'm supposed to be at APSU, okay? I say, get a room, okay? You do not want to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and try to drive through Nashville and deal with the blue lights that can, and red lights that can pop up anywhere, and all of a sudden you're sitting in a traffic jam for an hour and a half. So even if you're relatively close by, you have a green light to spend the night prior to the site visit at a location in that vicinity. So what we again encourage is that the team meets the night before. And if you're all staying at the same hotel, sometimes people say, well, I teach that night, so I can't get there till 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. Then I always suggest that if at all possible, that you identify a hotel that provides breakfast or has a breakfast place really close by, and then you can have a team meeting at breakfast, and sometimes both. But make your travel arrangements with your own institution, just like fill out your travel form, just like you were going to a meeting or going to a conference, okay? And then on that travel form, be sure to write that travel expenses will be reimbursed by TBR system office. So your expenses are actually going to be paid for by excuse me, that's wrong. What you write, your expenses will be paid for by the host institution. Sorry, you should have stopped me. You know better than me, Scott. So if you are from Chattanooga State and you're going to Vol State, you're going to travel up there, you're going to have mileage, you're going to have overnight, you're going to have a couple of meals that you're going to have to pay for, all right? Vol State will reimburse you. All right, then when Vol State gets done, they will send a bill for all of the academic audits that they've hosted to the system office, and Vol State will be reimbursed. So it's part of the system office budget this year, and next year is anybody's guess. So, but right now, knock on wood, things are looking good at least from the governor's budget for higher education has been very generous. So we're hoping that we can keep this process up. It's always a year-by-year thing.
Does it change if we're outside of your system?
No, you'll still be reimbursed. You'll still be reimbursed.
I was thinking about just having UT reimbursed by APSU. Does it get complicated?
Yeah, you individually will be reimbursed by Vol State. Yeah, we'll do that. So you'll be reimbursed, and then Vol State will be reimbursed for your travel as well. So in other words, the host institution, they could have an auditor from another community college, they could have an auditor from an LGI, they could have an auditor from a UT system. The host institution will be reimbursed for all three. Okay? So if they have somebody from business and industry, wherever it is, they'll be reimbursed for the travel expenses, and all of you as auditors will be reimbursed. Okay? But good point. But just make sure that you file the proper forms at your own institution, and just say that basically it's no cost to your institution, that your expenses will be paid for by another institution, but just so that your supervisor knows when you're going to be leaving, and that also means that you're traveling on college business, and therefore you're covered by workman's comp or whatever, should, God forbid, knock on wood, anything happen while you're en route or whatever. Okay?
So at previous audits, the host institution would find out who was staying and reserve rooms at a hotel and make those arrangements and pay for them ahead of time. But this year, it's up to the auditors to make those arrangements?
It all depends upon the institution you're visiting. Some institutions will say, okay, who's coming? They'll take care of it. They have an arrangement with the hotel. They'll make your reservations for you. All you have to do is walk in and say your name, and the bill's covered. Other institutions will say, the hotel is the Clarion, and then you'll pay for it and then be reimbursed for it. So it really depends upon the institution. That does vary. Yep. Good. So in preparation for the site visit, and this is largely the responsibility of the team leader, but when you go on the site visit, you should really have kind of a team script of questions that you're going to raise. It doesn't mean that you're restricted to those questions or those prompts, but at least you've got something to work from. And remember that you're going to work with different stakeholder groups. So you're going to meet with a group of faculty. You're going to meet with a group of students. You're going to meet with a group of fill in the blank. It might be advisory council members. It might be adjunct faculty. It might be support staff of the program, people from the library, from the advising center, from the learning center, whatever it might be. Each group will have a little bit of a different mix of programs, but you'll always meet with the full-time faculty, and you'll always meet with a group of students. So the questions you ask of students might be slightly different than the questions that you ask of faculty. So you want to make sure that you have a group of questions for each stakeholder group. And then before you leave, you should kind of, it always helps to start with a document, in my mind, that's got something written on it rather than just a blank screen. So if you've come up with some ideas for commendations or for affirmations or for recommendations, then put those down. You're not beholden to them. You can change them after the inputs of the site visit. Okay, so for example, in the earlier discussion we had where a program collected all this assessment information but didn't seem to do anything. So you may have already pre-written a recommendation. We recommend that you use the results of your assessments for improvement. But then when you get there, you find out that they're already doing it. So what do you do with that recommendation? Delete, okay? And we've had instances where recommendations, once you get there and you find out what they're doing with it, become affirmations. Well, we think you're doing a great job. Keep doing it. We've had instances where commendations have become recommendations. So I had the experience once where we went to a program, and in their self-study they had talked about how they had all gotten together, adjunct full-time faculty, and put together a set of PowerPoint presentation slides for every lesson throughout the entire semester. And everybody had those PowerPoint slides, and everybody followed them. And we just thought, wow, this is just super. I mean, they've just got it locked in, everybody's involved, it's progressive, it's interactive, it's creative. We just had commendation written all over that. Then when we got there, we had a question for the students. And this, we asked the students, what uses of technology really benefit you in this program, in the courses in this program? And it got real quiet. And they kind of looked left and kind of looked right, and suddenly one bold young woman said, "Not PowerPoint." And the floodgates opened. There was so much PowerPoint, it was such overkill. It was stifling conversation, it was stifling questioning, it was stifling the natural ebb and flow of an instructor's. They were all trying to get through it was like, okay, we got to get through slide 37 today. And it had placed such a rigidity into the whole program that it had stopped really being a learning environment, and they were just getting through the material. So this commendation we had actually kind of devolved into a recommendation for them to reflect upon. And first of all, we said, you ought to listen to whom? Students. Maybe you ought to find out one of those mid-course correction type things, but there seemed to be kind of obviously a communication gap between what was happening on the pedagogical side and what was happening on the receiving side. So it was a dramatic example of a process that we perceived one way, and then through the conversations at the site visit, we came to a different understanding. So realize that what you prepare ahead of time then is not cast in stone, but rather provides you with a guide to build upon. And sometimes you just, what you've come up with beforehand, you're like, yep, it is the way they said it was, and we're going to reinforce that. So in preparation for the site visit then, this is kind of the schedule. Right away, there are going to be exceptions. All right? I believe is it the Geographic Information System one at Rhone State that you're going to meet the night before? Yeah. So in that particular program, that program is delivered only in the evening, and the only time to meet with the students is in the evening. So the team has graciously agreed to develop a customized schedule where they'll actually start the site visit process the night before and then continue it during the day. And maybe they'll get done, quite a bit earlier. Grin. But that's how that's done.
Kurt has reserved Joe's Bar and Grill for that meeting.
Yeah, there you go. But this just gives you a little bit of a pro forma kind of ebb and flow of the site visit schedule. And yeah.
So is the site deciding who those stakeholders are in meeting 3 and things like that, or are we reaching out to them before we go and saying we would like to convene with a group of
The latter.
adjunct faculty? Okay.
The latter. Very good point. So
Plug them into the schedule somewhere.
yeah. You as a team will create the parameters around each group, right? So sometimes in programs, for example, that have a high incidence of adjunct faculty instruction, one of the practices that many teams follow is to have a meeting with the full-time faculty and then a separate meeting with the part-time faculty and adjunct faculty. That's one group that you might want to define. In terms of students, we've kind of gone through the school of hard knocks and found out that if you are not prescriptive over which students you want in the room, then you only get one type of student. Now in some programs, the only students who are in that program are students who are in that program, like EMT I'm thinking of. There are not a lot of people who are taking an EMT class as a gen ed elective. okay? In fact, they're restricted. They can't take it unless they're in the program. So then you would be focusing on EMT students. But if you were reviewing, let's say, a fine arts program, and some of you are, then you would probably want to look at students who are majors in the fine arts, maybe at different levels, freshman, sophomore if they're community college, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior if they're at a university program. You may want to look at majors, but you also may want to look at students who are taking the courses as non-majors, who are taking it as a general elective for general education, as an elective for general education. So again, each program has its own admixture, if you will, its own formula of what works best. But I was early on a team where we were doing, I believe it was an English program, and every student in the room was an English major who was in the honors program. Okay, so that gives you a very distilled and singular kind of perspective on the English program. They all thought it was great, by the way. Okay, can you imagine? So you really want to get, you want a couple of those people in the room, but you also want somebody who's taking Comp 1 who's an engineering major, or Comp 1 because they're in the nursing program. So how is that part of the English program serving their needs? So, but if you don't talk about that as a team, then you'll get something like the program will walk through the lunchroom right before you're going to meet with them, and they'll drag people out and say, can you come meet with these people? That won't help you a bit. So you got to be careful to be prescriptive in what you want with regards to your students and also your stakeholders. So if you see that, for example, there are a lot of references in this program to placement into a career, meeting the needs of employers, meeting the needs of the workforce, then ask to meet with 5 or 6 of those program supporters and those employers. Years ago, we did an academic audit of the concrete management program at MTSU, one of the most renowned such programs in the country, by the way, and we asked to meet with some of the people that served on their advisory committee or employed their graduates. We had people flying in to attend that meeting on their own dollar, okay? Because they were affirmed this concept of going through a quality improvement process, and they wanted to be in the room to share their ideas and respond to our questions. So more commonly, the people are right there in the community. Every now and then, we've had it where those people come in, the only time they can come in, or the lure to getting them in is to bring them in for a lunch meeting. So you wind up having a little bit of a working lunch. That's not typical, but it's possible. So as long as you're flexible, and that's why working, especially the team leader and the program coordinator, collaboratively on the front end, then you can kind of get the whole thing in place to your satisfaction. So any questions then about the schedule as it looks, and just an overview? Okay. Let me go to, this is kind of what you do the night before while you're having dinner. Discuss any key issues, review your schedule and logistics. There are sometimes instances where you split up as a team. If, for example, the program you have has a particular lab facility. I remember going to a program where it was an early childhood education program. They had a preschool right on the campus. So they wanted to show us the preschool, but we couldn't figure out, well, if we all left and went to the preschool and came back, there's an hour. and we didn't have an hour to give. So we had one representative of the team go visit the preschool, and then the two of us met with another stakeholder group at that time. So that's probably less common, but it can happen. So don't feel that there are rigid rules on with regards to those logistics. Typically, the team meets in one place for the entire day, but even that's not written in stone. We've even had instances where, very uncommon, where there's an outlying site that's not too far away, and they actually meet at, they wind up going to both sites during the course of the site visit. So keep track of your mileage. And then another just little logistical thing, since there's 3 of you, you're going to have a series of questions. Typically, it's the case that you ask the questions about the focal area that's been your responsibility. But I always suggest that everybody should take notes. There are some amongst us who can just listen and 2 hours later craft responses based upon what they've heard. And I envy them to the nth degree, okay? I always say I have a good memory, but it's short. So I have to take some notes. And what I've found is that it's sometimes uncomfortable to be generating a question, and then as soon as you stop speaking, to look down at your screen or to look down at your notepad and start transcribing. So if you know that someone on your team's kind of got your back, it makes for a little bit more of a convivial environment. Remember, we talk about these as being structured conversations, not inquisitions. So if we try to keep that open and rapport-centric kind of environment, it seems to work well. And then the night before, enjoy one another's company. You'll feel like you know each other if you don't know each other, because you've been working together so closely. So sometimes some of you are going to put faces with names right from the outset. Others will have to await when you have a chance to meet. Of course, with Skype and WebEx and whatnot, you can just beam each other up and all. It's a crazy world, isn't it? During the site visit, the one thing that I can attest to is being consistent in all the site visits that I've ever been on is time flies. You have 50 minutes or 60 minutes or whatever with a group, and it just races through. So make sure that your prompts are not like sportscasters' questions where they talk for 28 minutes and then the athlete goes, next question. So you want your questions to be short and the answers rich, but for each group, one of you, especially the team leader, should remind the group that you're going to have somewhere between 6 and 10, 12, any more than about 10 or 12, and it's almost hard to manage. So you can restrict that too. We don't want any more than 10 people in the room. 10 students is enough. And to get in 50 minutes time, everybody engaged in talking a little bit is quite a task. So remind them that we want you to give us a good answer, not just a yes or a no. So we're going to form questions that can't be answered yes and no. We won't say, do you use the results of assessment for improvement? Yes. Next question. Okay, what we want to do is ask a question like, how do you use the results of assessments for improvement? And then we get into process. So that's sort of what we want, but we have to remind them that we do want to hear from more than one of you. And at times you have to shut people off, okay? So years ago I was kind of delved into the critical thinking world, and the guru of that, Richard Paul, used to say that rather than state the question and then wait for a response, put somebody on notice, and then ask the question. So I would say, Flora, how do you? Okay? I wouldn't do this all the time, but if I haven't heard from Florida, she's just been so gracious and just letting everybody else speak. She's given up an hour of her day, and she's a professional who's invested in this program in a big way. I want to hear what she has to say. So I make it a point to lead with that person. So I always have people introduce themselves, scribble down their names, you know, who's sitting where. And if everybody does that, we usually remember. And also, there will be times when you'll want to ask follow-up questions. And that's perfectly fine and well. Once again, be mindful of the time. So follow up to clarify and verify. Be aware of the time and take notes. All right? Anything? And then some of you have been there. Any cautionary tales of running these conversations, these groups?
Just the opposite. Instead of just a yes, the long-winded. Loves the program and wants to tell you. And so then you have to kind of say, okay, the next point.
Okay, good, good. And again, saying that at the front end, that we want you to explain yourself, but we have lots of questions in a short amount of time, so please don't, sometimes that doesn't work. There are some people who just want to say, well, to answer your question, I really need to look back to when I was in the 4th grade. And then it's like, okay, it's biography time.
Or if they say, I don't have much to say, but.
Yeah, those are the ones to watch out for. Ones to watch out for. So sometimes you do have to say, excuse me, but thank you very much, but we do have other questions. And realize that you're in control of the meeting. So, but that's a good point, Patsy, and it's a good thing to look forward to and try to preempt. Then, remember we had talked about the CARs, accommodations, affirmations, and recommendations. This is the one thing that everybody will produce by the end of the day. So that's why I say start with a draft, and then you can use your work time from lunch until the exit session to really kind of develop what you feel are the most appropriate accommodations and affirmations and recommendations. Don't feel like you have to commend everything or affirm everything. We're looking for somewhere between 3 and 5 of each of these. So kind of prioritize, and if you just kind of say like everything is commendable about this program, then you send a message that too often results in a certain kind of lethargy, actually. Well, we're pretty good, so we can just kind of sit on our laurels here. We want to make sure that we're prompting that improvement. So it's making that best better. So in terms of definition, they're pretty self-explanatory. When I think of accommodation, I think this is something that I want to steal. Okay, so I always have said this for now over 40 years of being in this crazy business. All good teachers are thieves. All good teachers are thieves. We see something that's working, something, whether it's at a presentation, whether it's in our colleague's classroom, whatever it might be, we steal it. And the first time we use it, we might acknowledge it. Say, you know, well, yeah. Now, one of my colleagues, Janice, has framed the question this way, and let's see how you respond to this. And if they respond positively, that's the last time I will ever mention Janice in my life. It'll be my arrow in my quiver, okay? But it's a compliment to my colleague, because now I've taken something that is that I value and I've found to be valuable, and I've inculcated it into my own bag of tricks. So if you think of what's commendable, whether it's at in a classroom activity all the way up to a program development process, the way they've structured their website, the way that they stay in touch with their students. I remember one site visit I went on for a philosophy program, and see, it's coming back around. We asked the students, what are some of the things that they do in the philosophy program that you really like? And they said, donuts with the dean. And we said, excuse me? And they had this thing with every other Friday morning. They gathered in the dean's conference room, and it was open. Nobody had to come. And they had coffee and donuts, and they just had a chance. The dean would be there. And if the dean couldn't be there, it was a department chair or someone like that. But typically the dean was there. I mean, it was something that they felt was really important. And it was a chance for them to talk about the program and talk about applications of philosophy in real life without the onus of it being part of the curriculum and being graded on it. There was no extra credit for it other than a couple of extra calories. But I came away from that saying, that is a really cool idea. And once again, a box of Krispy Kremes is a small, it used to be a small investment. Now you have to take out a second mortgage to get a box of Krispy Kremes. But whatever it might be, it was just, I thought, a very positive way of building rapport and interfacing with students in a non-threatening environment, in an easygoing environment. And obviously it was important enough for those students to bring it up in that conversation. So that's the kind of thing you're looking for, and sculpting into accommodation, and then going back and trying it in your own shop, or suggesting to your dean or your department head at the next faculty meeting that, hey, this is what they're doing up at that college's philosophy department. What do you think? Shall we give this a try? So that's the kind of thing you're looking for.